Welcome back, everyone, to the GogertZone Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Gogerty, here with my wonderful co-host, Connor Calzone. Thank you for joining me. Today, we got wide receiver tiers. We're going to be going over Connor's wide receiver tiers. We're going to compare them to some regular tiers. I haven't seen these before. I'm going to be critiquing them live, and I'm going to see this time we're going to switch it around, and I'm going to slap you in the face for some projections that I think are bad, and I can't wait to see it. Let's get into it. Connor, thanks for joining us.
Of course, Ryan. Thanks for being here. I'm very excited to show you my wide receiver tiers because this is exactly how it's going to look at the end of the season. Literally, bar
Yep.
for bar, right here. It's going to be perfect. So you're going to give me
Important to
slaps. You're
note,
going to give me
we've
slaps in the
never,
face, but
I'm pulling up your projections here, and I already see one that really stands out off the bat. But I'm really excited to get into it. Why don't we just jump right into it? Who do you got for us in the S tier?
yes. So in the S tier, just going to go over them kind of person by person first, and then we'll kind of get into a more in-depth breakdown of some of these guys. But as wide receiver one, I've got Jamar Chase. This is the don't question it tier, and Jamar Chase is about as not questioning as you can get. He was the wide receiver one last year, and the offense is going to be just as good for the Bengals, and the defense is going to be just as bad. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities to catch the ball, and he's just an amazing player, amazing yards after the catch guy. Don't question it. Number two, I have CD, which is different than ESPN. They have Justin Jefferson at two and CD at three. I have them switched. Then at four, I have Puka Nakua. And five, a little bit above the ESPN projections, I have Nico Collins.
Okay. I already have problem with your S tier for the running backs episode, which if you haven't checked that out already, head over to the running back tiers episode. I already have a problem with this. Nico Collins, I haven't fallen in love with him in a past season, so maybe I don't have that connection, but I have fallen in love with someone who's off this list who I think absolutely should be, and that is Malik Neighbors. I am
Oh, the Giants
shocked.
fan likes Malik Neighbors. Crazy.
Well, you know what? It's all right. We're back after some technical difficulties. CD Justin Jefferson, I could see that going hand in hand. I have a personal opinion that Jamar Chase might be more on the like he performed so well because he was trying to prove everyone wrong and get the biggest payday possible. And not that he's not going to still be a stud, but just the fact that the thought that he has such a wide gap between him and everyone else because of last year's performance, I don't think is correct. I think his talent level, while absolutely elite, is hard to differentiate from Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and then what I believe is Malik Neighbors. I'm looking at this these stats from him last year: 1,200 yards, 16 points per game. Not amazing, but he had a 32% target share. Malik Neighbors did last year. And projections this year, his yards is supposed to go up over 200 yards this season. Another touchdown to increased quarterback play. And no new receivers that should be eating into that target share. So I expect big things from him. So Nico Collins stands out to me a little bit on that one, but overall, I think that the point remains that this S tier here are guys that you're taking in the first round. You're not thinking twice about it. I might think about Nico Collins. I might not take him even if he was available at 12 overall, but absolutely, all these guys are just absolute target hogs. You're really really happy to have any of these guys in your first round.
Yeah, so just something I kind of want to say. I think, like you said, the top three, it's really obviously don't question it, right? You can put them in whatever order you want. I have Jamar at one. I have CD at two. I think he's going to have a huge bounce back season. Last year he was banged up a little bit. He had Cooper Rush throwing him the ball for like half the season, but in 2023 he had 1,750 yards. I mean, the dude is unbelievable, and the Cowboys should be a lot better this year. And it's going to be a tough division, so they're going to be slinging it out in games a lot of the time, and you don't really trust that running back room in Dallas either. So it really is going to be an emphasis on the passing game. And
Mhm.
I just that's a slight preference over Justin Jefferson for me. We don't really know what JJ McCarthy's about yet, so it's not like he was some
All
kind
right.
of amazing gunslinger throwing for 6,000 yards in college. He was a very good game manager as quarterback, but we don't really know what he's going to look like on an NFL level. I really like Puka. I'm just assuming that Matthew Stafford's going to stay healthy, but Matthew Stafford has proven for his whole career that he can sustain huge fantasy wide receivers, so I like him at four. And Nico Collins at five. Maybe, you did kind of hit the nail on the head there. I fell in love with him over the last two seasons. I've had him on my fantasy teams the last two seasons in various leagues, and he has been unbelievable. The big asterisk here, though, is when healthy. He, I think, averaged the most fantasy points per game last season. In 2023, definitely. I'm not sure about last year. But when healthy, he had like 1,200 yards or 1,100 yards in just 12 games last year.
So
And
is this an overall receiver, like receptions, yards, touchdowns, all three just seem to go in tandem with CJ Stroud. He's just that dude.
he's that dude. And I mean, you got it. You do have to think about it. He was so good last year. I have the stats up here: 68 receptions, 1,006 yards, 7 touchdowns in just 12 games. And one of those games he sat out half the game too. So basically 11
Mhm.
and a half games he put up those stats, which is on pace for, if he plays a 17 game season, basically 1,800 yards and 12 touchdowns with 100 and something catches. Right? I mean, that's really
Right.
really good. And in 2023, 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns, played just 15 games. He's got to
Okay.
stay healthy, but if he can put it together for a season and CJ Stroud bounces back from a kind of tough sophomore season that he had, which I think he
Mhm.
will, it's a weak division. He's going to have a lot of opportunities. He's not competing with Tank Dell or Stephon Diggs for targets anymore either. Like they got some new blood with like Jaden Higgins, who's gonna get some work in the passing game, but he's
Yeah.
the alpha wide receiver one on what should be a good team in a bad
Okay.
division. If he can stay healthy, I think he's that dude.
All right. So maybe I'll consider him a little bit more going forward, but I still wouldn't take him over Malik. And it's not just because I'm a Giants fan.
Mm.
And I've got the new Giants Crucial Catch merch. If you haven't noticed, you get the 2025 Crucial Catch. Came in yesterday. We're
Sponsored by the
pumped
New
to be
York
repping this.
Giants.
Sponsored by the New York Giants. I haven't had actually a Giants. I haven't felt justified in getting a Giants T-shirt since I got the old pink breast cancer awareness T-shirt like 7 years ago, and I've been wearing that one for 7 years. Got the Crucial Catch merch, but that's not why I'm all about Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is actually projected one more point per game than Nico Collins, and obviously it's ESPN projections, whatever that ends up being. But I just can't imagine that coming off of a season where he had 16 points per game with Danny Nichols or Pesos, as you called him in
Danny
our past
Danny
episode.
Ugandan sense.
Right, and who's the other? Drew Lock as best quarterbacks, putting up
Tommy
those numbers.
DeVito.
And then you got Russell Wilson this year, who's like he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He gets so much disrespect because of some down years, but people undervalue how much the system plays into a bad year or a bad like learning a new offense is one of the hardest things you could possibly do, and doing it with bad protection or just a play caller that doesn't design receivers to be open can just do all these terrible things. But Malik Neighbors, honestly, this is he reminds me more of Jamar Chase in his style of play, but as a Giants fan, he almost reminds me of Odell, where it didn't matter what the route was. He's just going to be open. And if he's not open, he's still open. So,
Yeah.
like, throw him the ball. And so that's my only gripe with that one. But again, this is all in that same, like, upper elite tier. If you end up with any of these guys, if they fall to you, like, absolutely grab them. No problem with that. What you got next?
All right. Yeah. So in the A tier, I do got Malik Neighbors right here at the top of A tier. I mean, I would have been totally fine
You
adding a
kept them
sixth
close.
member to the S tier and and then having the next
Okay.
five as the A tier. I think he's right there. I get a little bit worried about. I mean, I think people overblow the Russell Wilson struggles. I mean, 2 years ago in Denver, it was not his fault that they were losing games. I mean, they just couldn't execute in crunch time, which I don't know what that says about him, but whatever. And in Steelers, I mean, he was like 5-1 or something before he got benched. So I think
Right.
those problems are overblown. But the fact that they don't have another receiver, I think
Hmm.
he's going to get doubled every game. Can he still get open? Yes, because he's that guy. But anyway,
Hmm.
I have Malik Neighbors as wide receiver 6. I have Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver 7. Amon-Ra St. Brown as wide receiver 8. AJ Brown as wide receiver 9. Tyreek Hill as wide receiver 10. And finishing up with Lad McConkey in wide receiver 11. And these guys are target machines.
I mean, you're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that. But this does interest me. I'm looking at this compared to the ESPN projections here. Everyone's off by a position or two or three even. What are your thoughts? What stands out to you here?
Yeah, so I think those 4 through 8, Puka, Nico, Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Amon Ross St. Brown, I think you can put them in whatever order you kind of want. I did decide to put Amon Ross St. Brown at the bottom of that tier at 8, even though he's ranked, I think, as 7
That's
or
interesting.
6 in
Yeah,
ESPN, just
6. He's ranked
because
at 6.
it's a really hard balance, delicate balance to think of because yes, he's on such an elite offense, but also they're gonna have so many mouths to feed, right? It's gonna be Jameer Gibbs, it's gonna be David Montgomery taking a lot of goal line work, it's gonna be Jamison Williams, it's gonna be Sam Laporta, it's gonna be Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're gonna have to score 60 touchdowns in order to make Amon-Ra St. Brown a top 5 wide receiver. And can they? Yeah, they
Well, that's the
can.
thing. They were the top scoring offense last year.
They
So,
were,
you
and I
know,
don't see that
it-
changing. But
so it's not
Jamison
the piece of
Williams
the pie, it's the
seems
size of the
yes.
pie.
Yes, that's exactly what
I
it is. But from what I'm hearing and what we saw at the end of last season, JMO is really going to start being a wide receiver too, and not an afterthought of a wide receiver too next to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I have heard a little bit of that out of camp as well. So, all right, 8 versus 6. I'd be more
Yes.
than happy to get him on Ra at wide receiver 8. I mean, if we're looking at middle of the second round here, I'd be very stoked for him to fall to me there.
Yes,
I
I
see you got
think
AJ Brown at 9.
yeah, that's his ESPN rank. I don't love AJ Brown because he has been he I also had him in a fantasy team last year and he was injured a little bit and there are some games where he would just kind of fall off the face of the earth and Devontae Smith would get all the
Mhm.
work. But that's one of the one of the things you have to be willing to deal with when you take a high profile guy on a high profile offense that has a lot of mouths to feed. Pretty similar
Yeah.
position as Amon-Ra St. Brown. The two
Uh-huh.
guys who are a little bit over the ESPN ranking that I do want to get your take on are Tyreek Hill and Lad McConkey. I'm such a big Tyreek Hill guy. As
This
a
is so funny to
Jets
me.
fan, I've seen him torch the Jets on multiple occasions, and I just don't think he's washed yet. I mean, we keep seeing him in off-season videos running a 9.95 100-meter dash, so he's just as
He's not
fast.
washed.
You don't lose your hands, right? Like he still has
No, I
amazing
agree with
hands. Those
that.
are the two things that made him so good in Kansas City and his first few years in Miami. The only thing is do you think Tua's going to start throwing up gang signs again? And that is a very real thing that you have to deal. It's a very real thing you have to think about. But I just don't think, to a degree, you can really draft based on injury concerns unless there's
Right.
a really pressing injury thing that's happening, like CMC last year.
Right.
Like they were the things about him not knowing whether his Achilles and calf were intact. That is a pressing injury issue. But not drafting Tyreek Hill just because maybe Tua will decide to dive headfirst into four defensive linemen and get another concussion, I don't think you can really detract that for Tyreek Hill. He's still
Right.
a top 10 wide receiver in my book.
So our to our viewers out there, if they might not have gotten the reference, Connor's referencing when Tua got hit so hard. This is very sad. I've dealt with concussions; they're no joke. But he was referencing when Tua's arm went up and his fingers did some what looked like gang signs because of how hard he was hit. And we obviously wish him all the health in the world, and we're very grateful that we still have him around in the league after all those concussions
Yes.
and still throwing the ball. But that's a good point. I actually love Tyreek Hill. I similarly wouldn't have him down at 12 where ESPN has him. I like him up in that 10 range. What I'm finding the issue is that too many of the people in the leagues I'm in are drafting him around 10 or even 9 because they have that nostalgia and there is no reason to believe the fall off. He's not one of those big receivers that, when they get older, the receivers hit their cliff around age 30, 31,
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of lose a step, lose their agility a little bit just as they get older. But Tyreek Hill is still a fast, twitchy guy.
Mm-hmm.
If he had a history of injuries in his career, like hamstring pulls, I'd be a little bit more concerned at this age. But that wasn't the issue.
Yeah,
The issue
he's been
last year was
very,
he didn't have a
very
quarterback.
relatively healthy last year. I think
Right,
he had one
and I
nagging
think
thing last year, but like throughout his entire career, he's very, very rarely missed
he's
games.
because he's a track guy and track guys keep their legs like healthy. I think he's going to be okay. And I think it's just been compounded with the negative talk about if he wants to be there. So those aren't concerns for me. I think he actually might end up being the steal out of the receivers here, besides some late round sleepers, some late round boom bust guys. And Lad McConkey, it's so funny that you group those two together because I see them as absolute polar opposites. Lad McConkey, and not just because he's white, reminds me of Julian Edelman. He reminds me
He's a
of
guy that just plays the game the right way.
but it's because he knows how to get open, and that's something that is not inherent to a lot of receivers. A lot of these guys that get drafted because of their physical traits don't have the agility or the route tree that everyone else does. Some receivers, like especially some rookies, are very limited in their route tree. Lad McConkey can run all of them, and
Mhm.
the truth is that just a quick jab step, a comeback route, something like that, is something that he excels at. And Justin Herbert obviously trusts him immensely with that. So I was very surprised going into this year because I didn't have him on any teams last year, seeing how well he finished off last year,
Yes.
how many fantasy points he had, points per game, receptions per game, and I absolutely expect that to continue. 13 versus 11, I think we're kind of like what are we really arguing about there? But if you can get him at that second, third round turn, I have no problem with that. This at all. Target magnets is a good descriptor of this because I think all these guys are the clear wide receiver one of their team are going to get a ton of targets. So first hands up, clap. Well, I mean, still, we should apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We've had some technical difficulties. We might just have to draft in person from now on, or do the podcast in person from now on. So, I mean,
Yes,
if we have to hang out more.
Discord could not handle the fact you giving me praise. I started to see you do claps, and then
Yeah,
everything went dark.
I was praising your tier A. I actually am very happy with your tier A. No more comments on it. You're absolutely right. All these guys, wide receiver ones on their team, target magnets. I expect them to finish top 12, each of them.
Yeah,
And while you're away, I just figured I'd
and
mention.
I was so high on McConkey last year. That was one of the big things on the pod. That was
You
one of my
were.
hot takes last year, and he was amazing. And
We had a lot of great takes
and
on
like you said,
receivers.
he ended the season so well. And I remember that game against the Texans in the wild card game. He was so good. He was the only thing he was the only source of the charts. I think he had like 180 yards and a touchdown or something
Yeah,
in that wide receiver
yeah,
in that last game.
it was nuts. There were a lot of receiver takes that we were absolutely correct on. I'd be interested to go watch that episode back and find out exactly who we were right and wrong on. I think I could be wrong on this. I think I didn't talk so highly of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think I was like slightly like I think we're hyping him up a little bit
Yeah,
too
because
much
he was
here,
going
but
like second, third round last year. He did not live up to that.
he
So
was going like a 7 or 11 overall,
yeah,
as not
that's
overall as a
nuts.
receiver.
Yeah,
And I was just like we got to pump the brakes on the rookies. They were, to be fair, they were doing the same thing with Malik Neighbors, and he did end up living up to that.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you got to get targeted, and it looks like they're still not throwing him the ball, Marv. That is, but
Yeah.
we'll get to him in a
We've
little
got a
bit.
lot of
A
sophomores up
tier.
here, but I don't even know where our first rookie is. I'll make sure to clock it when we get our first
Oh
rookie
yeah,
up
yeah,
here in
yeah,
the
yeah.
wide receiver tiers. But let's
There's
go on to
one
the.
notable
Oh,
person missing from tier A that I think is in your next tier that I would love
yeah,
to talk
yeah.
about.
We just
But
got
please,
to it. This is the solid, but I can't see the rest of the title. Solid but caution tier right here in tier the B tier. Drake London at number 12. I'm assuming that's who you're talking about. T. Higgins at wide receiver 13. Mike Evans, Mr. Consistency at wide receiver 14. Devontae Adams at number 15. Scary Terry at number 16. Cortland Sutton is 17, Calvin Ridley 18, and JSN at wide receiver 19. These are guys who, I see as pretty safe options, all things considered, but you're not going to expect them to be your wide receiver one on a week to week basis. But
hmm
let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'm gonna pull up his graphic right here, and that's Drake London. I believe in ESPN he is ranked as wide receiver 10, but I do not put him in that same tier as the guys like Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Lad McConkey. I don't think he's on that level. In 2024, he had
yeah.
1,271 yards and 9 touchdowns, which averaged out to 16 and a half points per game. And he did finish off the season really, really well. I think there's the last 2 games or something with Michael Penix Jr. But it's very hard, and you have to be very careful basing things off the last 2 or 3 games of the season because a lot of teams are tanking. A lot of teams are trying new things out. You know,
It's just a small
and
sample size,
and
right?
and this is something I mentioned in the running back episode with Drake London going this high. Do the Falcons have a good enough offense to sustain having 2 guys in the top 20 picks of fantasy drafts, top 16 picks? I think he might even be going in some places in fantasy drafts. We don't know anything about Michael Penix Jr. yet. We know he's a bit of a gunslinger, but we don't know how consistent he's going to be on a week-to-week basis. We know that Bijan Robinson's going to get his work regardless of whether Penix is good, whether the Falcons are good, etc. But Drake London, I think, is going to be a little bit more dependent on how good the Falcons and Michael Penix Jr. is, and I'm just not sure I'm ready to say that he's a top guy yet. But let me hear your
It
takes
is
on
a
it.
small target share. Well, you know what? It's a small sample size, those 2 3 games, but he did look so good, and it's one of those things where, people watch rookie college highlights and they're like, you could just see in his college highlights how good he was and whatever. And the truth is, in any of
You
those
could see
games,
in Johnny Manziel's college highlights how good he would be too.
that was a slightly different scenario. He just refused to study the playbook. But you look at guys like this and you go, okay, well they came out, they were drafted because of their talent and their production in college, but also because they had all the attributes you want in a top tier wide receiver in the NFL.
Right.
Um, I think that what I'm seeing is that I would be cautiously optimistic. So your title for this tier is pretty solid. But you look at these numbers, 1,200, almost 1,300 yards last year, 9 touchdowns is no joke. 16.5 points per game is a wide receiver one. And that's kind of surprising coming out of the Falcons when we were so used to the Arthur Smith offense where there was like no production out of anyone besides the running backs.
Right.
But a 29% target share is nothing to scoff at. And you do expect at least some level of continuation from last year, even if it wasn't quite that. So the projections do have him a little bit worse off than he was last year. That's still 16 plus points a game. And right now his ADP is 21.8. ESPN has him at wide receiver 10. A lot of people, we saw him in our mock draft episode fall all the way down to, I don't know, it was like 20 something. I mean 25, like
Yeah.
30 even. So
He
he's
fell.
someone that I'm caught like if he fell, I would take him, but other than that, I wouldn't want to. But actually, that's not the player I was pointing out that I thought was missing from the A
Oh,
tier.
okay.
So if you go back to the main player graphic, I'm actually thinking about T. Higgins. T.
T.
Higgins is
Higgins.
an interesting study here because he got the big contract before Jamar Chase. And
Mm-hmm.
then that led to the Bengals holdout where they had to decide, are they going to pay two receivers elite wide receiver money? And people were seriously starting to speculate if they were going to do that. And then they did.
T. Higgins was
And
in a
what they were
lot of trade
saying is,
rumors 2 years ago.
they were saying we have two wide receiver ones and we love them both. And
Mm-hmm.
if you take away, and I know you can always nitpick, but if you take away those 50-point games, T. Higgins was just as good as Jamar Chase on a points per game basis. He had himself a 45-point game or something like that. And I actually traded away my beloved Saquon Barkley in a 16-team keeper league for T. Higgins and a second rounder because I see him as a crux of my offense as a wide receiver, and I have him on that team, and he's going to be my wide receiver one. And then I got a second round pick out of that as well. And I couldn't be more happy with it. I miss Saquon dearly. I love him. If you ever saw our other episodes, he's near and dear to my heart. But I think T Higgins probably belongs in the A tier because if he keeps up any level of production, I think he has a floor of wide receiver 12, but has all the upside in the world.
It's a very interesting case scenario that we have to discuss here. Out of my top 25 wide receivers, I only have two that I would say are the wide receiver twos on their team, and that is T. Higgins here and Devontae Adams, both in this tier. And
So,
there's these guys are so talented, right? T. Higgins is
this tier
so
could almost be called like elite at some point
yes.
because
There
everyone on this tier was like at least elite in 1 year or one chunk of a
except
year.
maybe JSN. I mean, he was good last year, but I'm not sure you'd go as far to call
ASN
him
went
elite.
off towards the end of the year last year. People were like, that's why DK's gone. Is because
Yeah.
Jackson Smith and Jigba burst on the scene.
He is the wide receiver one, and he was the wide receiver one for the second half of the year. DK Metcalf was really slumping at the
Right.
second half of
But
last year.
we have
But
some really good talking points to do here with a couple of these players. I
yeah,
mean, Mike Evans, I'm noticing you have 4 spots higher than ESPN has him. Love the respect you're putting on my man's name. Actually, I prepared something just for this purpose because this past offseason, my wonderful godmother gifted me a Baker
oh
Baker
wow,
touchdown maker jersey,
Baker
home
Baker.
Buccaneers jersey. But that's not to say that I'm a Bucks fan per se. Just a proof of concept. I was rooting for him when he was on Cleveland, and I got this back in 2015 when I visited their first playoff game with Baker in the a Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida, and. And yeah, it's just to say that I trust anyone Baker Mayfield throws it to. So I love the respect you're putting on Mike Evans' name. Thank you for that.
And to talk about Mike Evans, I mean, he's just never not done it. It's just one of those things, kind of like we've said with Derrick Henry and in the NBA, LeBron. It's just like you can't really doubt him until they don't do it. He's had 1,000 yards
Done
for
like
11,000 straight seasons,
with
and
with
he's never
hamstring injuries.
with hamstring
With
injuries,
hamstring strains in the middle of the season.
not even playing 17 games, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years. He's just always going to do it. Baker Mayfield really seems to have found a home in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans seems to love that connection right there. And Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan are going to miss the first half of the season. We're going to talk about Emeka Egbuka later. I think he's going to be a solid wide receiver too. But it's going to be him and Egbuka really getting the crux of
I did not know
of the
McMillan was missing early games.
yeah. He was missing like six. He's on pup because he's got like a severe neck sprain.
Oh boy.
So
Oh boy. Well, that is a lot to be said.
it's
Yeah.
he's gonna be there. He's just never not done it. So I just I don't like you don't want to have Mike Evans as your wide receiver one because he doesn't have the crazy upside that maybe some of these other guys do. But his floor has got to be one of the highest in the NFL in terms of fantasy
If you had
football.
to keep, if you went running back, or running back elite tight end, you wouldn't hate having him.
You
It's not
don't
like the
hate
ideal
it.
scenario, but the second Godwin went down last year, Evans was like wide receiver 4. It was incredible. I mean,
Yes.
you'll at
Not
least have
saying he
that for the
doesn't have
first
ceiling,
half
but
of the
I
year.
don't think you're gonna see 45-point Mike Evans games. You're gonna
Right.
see a lot of
But if you
25-point
have him
Mike
as your
Evans
second
games.
wide receiver,
You're in a good
you're
spot.
ecstatic. You're in a
Yes.
good spot. And then I love these other guys, all these like elite at some point, you know what I mean? Devontae Adams, like if Matthew Stafford's healthy, this is a big point of discussion, but I have a theory that Matthew Stafford's going to be totally fine.
I do too.
I've dealt with a similar back injury before. I think he's going to be totally fine, and I think he's going to fall in love with Devontae Adams. I'm a Puka guy. I kept him in that 16 team keeper league. Devontae Adams scares me because he should be just in my opinion, Matthew Stafford's going to fall in love with him, and he's going to be the end zone guy. So
He's
Devontae
going to be
Adams at
the
wide
end zone
receiver
guy.
15.
Yes.
I have no problem with him there. Scary Terry got his 96 mil. Finally got the deal done. It's
Yes.
like all these guys
So
every
much
year. We
money,
always are
dude.
like,
That's I'm
are they
really
going to
kind
sit
of
out into the
shocked.
season? Are they going to not get the money that they want? It's like they always do.
They
With
almost
the
always
exception
do.
of like a second tier guy like Brian Thomas Jr. was not like the elite running back, and he was trying to demand a trade. But like Terry McLaurin got his
Ooh,
money. He
Brian
has
Thomas
been
Jr. Who are
Brian.
you talking
Oh,
about?
sorry, not Brian Thomas Jr. Brian
Robinson Jr. Yeah.
Robinson Jr. My
Yes.
apologies, but Brian Jr. I got mixed up there. But like Scary Terry, absolutely elite at times in his life. Cortland Sutton, we haven't seen as much, but we have seen in little spurts.
The second half of the
And
season with Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton, their connection was really, really strong.
he's gotten paid. That shows their confidence in him. And if you watched anything in the preseason, like he looks good. He's going to be a wide receiver one on a good offense. No problem with that. Calvin Ridley, like it's one of those guys where if you had him during his elite stretch with Atlanta, you're just like, I want to keep him.
Yeah.
But he could be a hit or miss. But Jackson Smith and Jigba also came on last year. Great tier. I'm interested to see who's next because I want to know who you have behind these
Yeah.
guys.
A few more things I do want to say. So on Cortland Sutton and Calvin Ridley, I'm 8 points above their ESPN ranks on both of them. They're both mid-20s
Oh,
guys. These guys are going in like the 60s, and I have them up here in like rank 60, like overall ADP 60. But I have them up here in like wide receiver 16, 17, which is around the late 40s to early 50s range. I think they're that good.
wow,
I'm a
yeah.
believer in Bo Nix and I'm a believer in Cam Ward. I think they both have good connections with those guys. And just to back up your point on Devontae Adams, I do think he's going to be the end zone guy. I do think Kyron Williams is going to be a little bit less involved in the offense this year. So instead of kind of getting those rushing touchdowns in the end zone, I think he's just going to be throwing fade routes to Devontae Adams in the corner, and they're going to be able to sustain both Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua in that offense in Los Angeles. So
Quick note, I think we might have to make a board bet on Kyron Williams because I disagree with you on that one. I think Kyron Williams
I've
got paid. He's gonna get given the rock. I think
I've thrown $20 on his under 11.5 touchdowns this season. So
Oh, boo! We need to get a big board. We need to bring the
we
huge
should
whiteboard
get a
back
big board. That would be a
and
good. That'd be
just write
good.
down our bets throughout the season. But
Yes.
anyways, good point. Yeah, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, both 8 spots higher than their ESPN projections, but I'm okay with any of these guys as my wide receiver too. I'm not upset with this.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, on to the C tier here now. These guys are got a lot of boom bust potential. I've got DK Metcalf at wide receiver 20. I've got Teteroa McMillan, T Mac at wide receiver 21. Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver 22. DJ Moore at 23, Xavier Worthy at 24, and Garrett Wilson at 25. And here is my first rookie wide receiver. Maybe not the one you'd expect, and him over Marvin Harrison Jr. I think is going to cause a little bit of controversy. I am really really high on T Mac, and he's 12 spots above his ESPN ranking here. ESPN has him ranked at 33. I had him ranked at 21. So
Damn.
give me your first takes
okay.
on this.
Well, Teteroa McMillan, definitely something worth talking about because he's the guy that's supposed to be coming in as the number one guy. We've talked about him on a previous episode this year already. Coming out of Arizona, I mean, he had 1,300 yards, 109.9 yards per game out of Arizona. Absolutely elite first rounder. I think he was picked like 8 overall, and the Panthers just traded Adam Thielen back to the Vikings. So it opens the room even more for him to be the number one guy. So he's a tall guy. He's a big guy. He's like the Mike Evans type of player.
I think
Not
he's
necessarily
6'5" or something like that. He was. I mean, I watched his
like
tape.
a 4.5, 40. So not like the absolute fastest guy in the world, but like Cooper Kupp had like a 4.6 when he had his pro day, whatever it was. Tedero McMillan is one of those guys that's supposed to get a huge target share right away, a much improved Carolina team, and yeah, he's one of those guys that I expect him to pop on the scene, not in a Malik Neighbors sense, but just be given all the targets and a lot of touchdowns. So I would have no problem if he ended up being this high. I mean, 12 spots higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not like insane about, but it just doesn't feel right. Like just knowing Marvin Harrison Jr. was getting all that hype coming into last year. But boom bust is a completely correct title for this group here because DK, we have no idea what he's going to be like with Aaron Rodgers on the Steelers.
Yes.
Is the Arthur Smith offense just going to eliminate all fantasy relevance for
Yeah.
receivers again, or is Aaron Rodgers going to fall in love with
And
him and
Pittsburgh
turn him into his
Steelers
next
in general. I
contact?
mean, when was the last time you really felt really good about a Pittsburgh Steeler? Any
I left
position.
Caleb Johnson off of my running back rankings.
Yeah.
It's just like I can't tell who's going to be good on
Like
the Steelers. So that
Deontay
makes sense,
Johnson, like 2020, maybe 2021 is the
right?
last time I really felt decent about drafting a Pittsburgh Steeler and having them play
Right.
on my fantasy team.
But also DJ Moore, he's supposed to be the wide receiver one on an improved Bears offense with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. But
Yes.
there's chirps of Roma Dunze kind of bursting onto the scene, and maybe the second half of the year he becomes the guy. So well again, boom bust makes sense. Xavier Worthy, we just found out Rasheed Rice is going to be suspended the first 6 games of the season.
Crashy Rice.
How much is he going to take? We really didn't get to see a lot of Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown on the field at the same time last year. So what's that target share going to look like? He could be that guy that we saw last year, but also he could end up falling all the way down to the depth chart. When Rasheed Rice comes back, he could end up being wide receiver three. And then Garrett Wilson. I'm actually surprised you put him this low. I
Yeah.
thought you were going to play favorites a little bit more, but I'm proud of you for not having him so much higher. I think Garrett Wilson is one of those guys that's so good he should be relevant, but I'm so scared for your Jets offense. I feel so bad for you. Like, I don't know what to expect with Justin Fields, but if anything that I saw in the preseason comes to fruition, I'm scared for you. I'm very sorry. Like, he was throwing balls into the dirt on like bubble
Yeah,
screens,
yeah.
So
I saw that, and it doesn't look good. And I am higher on Brees Hall as we saw in our running back rankings, and I'm lower
mhm.
on Garrett Wilson because I'm kind of accepting the possibility that Justin Fields might not be able to throw it accurately past a bubble screen. Right? He can barely even throw a bubble screen correctly. I
At
mean,
least you're managing expectations this year.
I have learned that it's better to think extremely pessimistically and maybe get a little bit more optimistic throughout
Life
the
of a New York
season.
sports fan, bro.
Yeah, it has been
Life
like
of a New
that.
York sports
It's
fan.
funny because I'm the exact opposite of the Knicks. I'm so optimistic whenever anything comes to the Knicks, but whenever it comes to the Jets, I'm so pessimistic. And there was a time in the mid 2010s that they were just as bad. If not, the Knicks might have been worse. I mean, there was some really bad time. But let's not talk about basketball. Let's talk about football
But you got
here.
him 8 spots lower
Yeah.
than he's projected on ESPN. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I don't know if I'm happy taking any of these, but if any of them are, if you end up being correct on any of them, they could be like a league winner going this late in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure I'm taking Tedero McMillan over a guy like even maybe Marv or Xavier Worthy, but assuming that he falls a little bit because he is actually ranked as wide receiver 33, if I'm taking him around wide receiver 25, I absolutely love that value. I mean, Tedero McMillan is the classic, just
Yeah.
bulky ass X wide receiver that we were talking about, slot guy. He can catch anything within his radius. He's gonna be able to get jump balls. He's not the fastest guy, but he's twitchy. I mean, I like I said, I watched like a 10-minute mixtape of his Arizona highlights, and he was just unbelievable. There was a game last year that he had like 300 yards against some FBS opponent, and I was watching the highlights of that, and it was nuts.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm really high on
he is.
Tedrick McMillan, and Bryce Young kind of catapulted himself back into relevance. You know, if Bryce Young did not finish the second half of the season as he did last year, I definitely would not have been as high on T-Mac overall because you know, you need a quarterback to throw you the ball. But I think that really the first half of last year, sitting behind Danny Dalton, kind of getting humbled a little bit, saying, like, you're not just going to have unlimited rain on this team. You don't have
That
unlimited
was.
slack.
But you know what? That was pretty brutal what they were doing with him.
It was
I mean,
brutal,
like you gotta give
but it
him
worked.
that.
But it worked, right?
It barely like he had to build his confidence back like methodically. Like they were almost giving up on him, like Josh Rosen from the 2018 draft class. I
Yeah,
don't know if
Nathan Peterman
that
type
rings a bell at
stuff.
all.
Yeah.
Baker's draft class. People were arguing between him and Sam Darnold over Baker, and that was with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson all the way down. And it was like it's very hard to assess quarterbacks
Right.
coming into the league. But I can tell you one thing: if you have a history of winning you at least have the expectation of winning when you get to the pros. And Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, that draft, did not have that. Bryce Young did. He went to Bama. He won a lot at Bama, and I think that like almost killed his confidence. But he's fine now. Thankfully, they built
Yes.
him back up. His first year was an absolute nightmare, but his second year was much better when he finally got to kind of turn things around, and you expect that trend to continue. I think he'll be a decent quarterback in the NFL. So yeah, no worries with Tedero on my end.
Yeah, and then the other guy I do want to point out, we talked about Garrett Wilson a little bit. I just have so little confidence in the Jets offense. But Xavier Worthy, you bring up a great point. We did hear that as I like to call him, Crashy Rice, is going to be
Oh
suspended for the
no.
first 6 games of the NFL season.
Oh
Hollywood
no.
Brown, we have not seen him kind of line up next to Xavier Worthy before,
Crashy
but
Rice.
it's a very interesting wide receiver room that we have there in Kansas City, and I'm not exactly sure how to play it, but Xavier Worthy was pretty good at the second half of last year. He's an absolute speedster with which means to me is regardless of what kind of sets they're running, he's always going to have that deep ball potential. He's always going to have that end around for 30 yards potential, right? Like he's never going to get
Mhm.
eliminated from that Kansas City offense, and Patrick Mahomes likes his fast guys. There's this guy named Tyreek Hill that I remember on the Kansas City Chiefs that he had a
Back in the day.
he had a pretty good connection with. He doesn't have the hands that Tyreek does, but he does have the speed. I do think that he is going to continue to develop more chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, considering that Rashee Rice is going to miss the first 6 weeks, and I think he's going to kind of keep that foot in the ground wide receiver one stand when Rashi returns as well.
Uh, I'm looking at this list here, and this actually reminds me. This is kind of the tier of the speedsters. It's also the tier of the Bama receivers. You got Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Judy. I mean, is there any Devonta Smith? Oh yeah, how did I miss Devonta Smith? Like you got four Bama receivers in this tier. It could have been the Bama tier, but it's also the speedster tier.
Yeah,
Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle, Zay Flowers, Rasheed Rice. I mean, well, Rasheed Rice is more of an all-around receiver, but I'm looking at Matthew Golden's stats here. He ran a 4.2940 in the
yes,
draft last
he's
year.
so
He is a
fast.
4.240 receiver. This is absolutely the tier of the speedsters. If you like those guys that are home run type players, go for the guys in this round. Matthew Golden, I love putting him in this tier. He probably should be going even higher. We probably aren't talking about him enough with Jordan Love as his quarterback. Christian Watson probably going to miss the first chunk of the season coming off of an ACL injury
I
and
just don't know that
coming
he's
back.
really going to be that anymore. I just don't think he's going to be that guy. There's too many nagging hamstring and ACL injuries. His hamstring
No,
imbalance is just going
Christian
to
Watson,
keep getting him.
he unfortunately seems to be perpetually injured, and we never root for that in anyone. Maybe he'll have a comeback season here and there down the road, but I don't think this year is that year. When you come off an ACL, I mean, you know better than anybody, Mr. Wobbly Knees, Mr. Spaghetti Knees,
Spaghetti
that it
knees,
takes
bro. Come on.
it takes like a year after you're healthy before you can really get back up to full speed. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, he's really just competing with Romeo Dobbs and Jaden Reed at this point. Matthew Golden might end up being the steal of the draft at this pick. If you get him
Yes.
at wide receiver 33, he could be that rookie receiver that ends up as wide receiver 6 when it's all said and
I,
done,
I, I,
depending on
I
the target
wanted to
there.
put him so much higher because I mean, maybe I'm just trying to keep him to myself. I've drafted Matthew Golden in almost every league. He's going in 12 team leagues. He goes in like the 7th to 8th round, dude. This guy could be your wide receiver 3, maybe even your second flex, depending on how you're drafting. He is going to be the
Yeah.
wide, like, mark my words, he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Jaden Reed
Okay.
has
All right.
been very inconsistent in his time there in Green Bay, and he has a nagging
Mhm.
injury that might keep him out of week 1. Romeo Dobbs was kind of relegated to wide receiver 3 on the depth chart last year, even behind what was his name, Dontavion Wicks, right? There's a
But the
lot of
point
just
being, like,
guys in that Green Bay room, but Matthew Golden, I think, from what I've heard in camp and what we've seen in preseason as well, has really elevated himself to the clear-cut alpha wide receiver 1 on this Green Bay Packers team.
so he right, and well, worth noting, he's on the smaller side, 5'11", 190. Still, just very serviceable. Like we just found out yesterday, Tyreek Hill, we think, is in the 5'8" range. He was listed, I think
Yeah,
his football height
you
was
called it a
was
football
5'10", but
5'10", but at pro day he was listed at 5'8" and a quarter. So
everyone does that on football day. You get 2 inches because of the cleats, and they just ask you what you want to list. You don't even
yeah.
have to actually get measured, which is
Well, it's the same
which is
shit as like
freaking
Kevin
hilarious.
Durant too, where he's listed as 6'9", but he's like 7 feet
Yeah.
tall. Like,
Yeah, no, exactly. But it goes to the same point. it's like the first time ever, not ever, but like in decades that
Ever.
the Packers selected a receiver in the first round. It might be
Yeah.
ever. They might have
Well,
never done, but they never did it for
they
Aaron
never did it
Rodgers.
for Aaron Rodgers. Yeah.
They never did it for Aaron Rodgers, and now they finally took a first round receiver here. Yeah, he could end up being the steal of the draft. Just a speedster out of Texas.
I
Just
have to say that 31 through 33 range, I'm in love with those three right there. Jerry Jeudy,
yeah.
Jacoby Myers, and Matthew Golden. I think
So
those three getting those in the seventh, eighth rounds, getting those guys as flexes for your season is going to win
mhm.
people leagues.
Right. I mean, and just to point this out, Devontae Smith and Jamison Williams stand out to me. I think that I particularly love them more than anyone else in this range, with the exception of Rasheed Rice if he was playing the whole year. But
Yes.
Jalen Waddle could fall into that if we knew Tua was healthy and he was doing well.
Right.
Those two guys stand out to me. But Jacoby Myers, do you think he's going to end up on a new team by the time the week's over?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
For
I
our
think
viewers, he requested a trade
yes.
from the Raiders, and the Raiders promptly picked up Amari Cooper from free agency. And I'm wondering if
Yeah, I mean,
they
come
kind
on
of
though.
knew that was their plan.
Amari Cooper's not going to take over wide receiver one duties
No,
in
but he
Las
meant a lot
Vegas.
to that organization, and I'm wondering if Jacoby Myers knew that they were bringing him in, and they were just kind of like, this is getting annoying. I've been the wide receiver one here for 2 years. Well, not true, with the
Yeah,
exception of Devontae Adams. But but once Devontae left, he was like the clear cut wide receiver one. He was the only guy that had really any fantasy relevance
yeah.
on the Raiders last year. Um,
They need some
but
really good
uh,
weeks
but
on the
this is
Raiders last year, on a team that
this is
was much
dependent.
much worse than this is going to be
This
this
is
year.
dependent on, yeah, they're going to be much better this year, but this is dependent on what team he ends up on.
Yeah,
So
but
so
I
we'll have
mean,
to see. 'Cause
I still think he's an extremely talented guy. Even if he does end up on another team as a wide receiver two, then I'm gonna be a little bit lower on him. As you can see from my rankings and what we've been talking about, I'm much more hesitant to draft wide receiver twos than I think the average person. I just really
yeah,
love those guys who you know are going to be target machines and you know they're going to be wide receiver one on their team if healthy. I'm much more keen to draft those guys than a guy like a
and then
Jalen
swinging for the
Waddle,
fences
a
later.
Jamison Williams, even though I'm high on Jamison Williams, Devontae Smith, right? I just don't love it as much.
I'm taking a peek at your F tier here, and I'm getting excited. Could you please go to the F tier now? I'm looking at this. This is a hilarious title. Please introduce your F tier to us.
Yeah, and the F tier here, so you know those D tier guys, like I mean, it's a little bit disingenuous to call them D tier, right? I mean, they're really good wide receivers, and they're gonna
It's
be at
just
least
the
like
ranking, right?
a
Yeah.
flex. You're fine putting those guys at your flex every single week, but these guys are the ones who you're not quite as sure that you're willing to put in your flex every single week. It's the hope and cope tier, right? You're really hoping that these guys, like maybe they could be super good, right? Maybe they're going
It's
to have a
boom and bust on
breakout
steroids.
season. Yeah, boom and bust on steroids. Maybe they're gonna have a really good season, but you're probably just coping with yourself. That you know, it's a little bit of copium going into your veins right there. But
This
let's
is a
let's
hilarious
introduce
list
this
here.
tier. It is George Pickens at wide receiver 34, Jawan Jennings is wide receiver 35, Travis Hunter at 36, Khalil Shakir at 37, Emeka Egbuka at 38, Stephon Diggs at 39, and Jordan Addison as wide receiver 40. Give me
Mhm.
your
And
initial takes on this hope and cope tier.
the first thing we have to point out to our viewers, if you still have drafts remaining, we had to find this out for my keeper league draft this past weekend. Travis Hunter in a standard ESPN PPR league will be counted for defensive touchdowns, not interceptions. So he will not
Yes.
get 2 points for interceptions unless you vote as a league and you designate it as it's like an individual player league or
An
something like
IDP
that, where
league,
defensive
yes.
players, IDP
As
league,
an IDP
and you can
league, if you
designate
put him
that.
at wide receiver, he will get both all of his wide receiver and cornerback stats. But in standard non-IDP ESPN leagues, he'll only get kind of pick 6 points, which maybe he
Six
gets one
touchdowns.
of. But like, you know, he's not getting more than one pick six probably, right? So you're really
You
just
know what's so
drafting him
funny though is
just
that
for his
people
wide
people that
receiver.
have been drafting him, they're like, oh, I'm gonna get all his pick sixes. Like they expect like 3, 4, 5 pick sixes out of
I
Travis
mean,
Hunter.
what was the
Or
guy's
whatever it
name?
is.
Deron Bland, the 2022 or 23 had like 4 pick sixes, and that was nuts, right? Like that was like never before seen
Yeah.
almost. So
And at the end of the day, that's increasing his fantasy value by a point for having the best defensive season possible. So
right.
it really does come down to if you're gonna let him get points for those interceptions or not. We'll have to see how much targets share. That stands out to me. George Pickens stands out to me. He's a huge boom bust guy in my eyes. He
Yes.
could be one of those, like, not quite T. Higgins, but one of those wide receiver twos on a team that has an elite season because the offense just has that many passing opportunities.
Yes, and they will have a
Khalil,
lot of passing opportunities, like we mentioned on CeeDee Lamb. Like that is not a running
right.
back room you're confident in, and I do expect the Dak bounce back season. So
Right. Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, I think have a little bit more of that bust potential in them. Stephon Diggs coming back from the injury, I don't know if like his knee's gonna hold up, how he's gonna be doing. It's also a Patriots offense. Like I'm excited for the Patriots this year. I'm hoping Drake May is good. I'm hoping the Patriots are we can root for them again, just to at least be fantasy relevant. But until I see it, I'm still like cautious. You know what I
yes,
mean? And Khalil Shakir is one of those guys that should have probably been better last year than he was. So until I see a leap from him, I'm also kind of scared. But Emeka Egbuka, and I hope I say that right, and I'm going to get better at it as the season goes on. Again, one of those guys that has all the potential in the world. We know Baker loves Mike Evans, but this is one of those guys that has the build and reputation to possibly be a leading wide receiver in the future. This might be the guy that Mike Evans hands the reins to when he retires. Emeka Egbuka is like an athletic freak. He has the hands of like the best hands of ever. I could exaggerate all day,
ever.
but the point is, at wide receiver 38, you could be getting what is the future wide receiver one on the Bucks. If you say Mike Evans unfortunately pulls a hamstring or something like that, or just say that for the first half of the year he's the second receiver in that sort of Chris Godwin role. Baker Mayfield proved that he was quarterback 4 last year at fantasy. He can get the ball to these receivers. That could also be a great steal. So hope and cope, not bad. And then Jordan Addison, we just talked about last night, another speedster.
Yeah, on
These
and
guys really
off the
gotta,
fields.
yeah, they need they need a separate speed limit for them on the road. Him and who was the other one? She Rice. I think these guys just need to slow down a little bit. They're acting like the Georgia football team right now. The Georgia football team always has
Do not give these guys the keys. Is what we're trying to
the
say.
traffic infractions from the Georgia football team. Like there should be a whole meme page dedicated to
There
it. But
probably is.
love the name
Um,
of this tier, Hope and Cope.
Yeah,
Good
I do want to
description.
say a few things about the Hope and Cope tier. I did make my wide receiver rankings before the official news that Godwin was, I guess it's not technically official yet, but every report that I'm seeing is that he's going to miss at least 3 or 4 weeks to start the season, and
Mhm.
who knows what he's even going to be like afterwards. And this was before the official news that Jalen McMillan was going to go on PUP because of his severe neck strain. I think I would probably put him all the way up to 34 at this point. He's still
Oh,
ranked
okay.
at wide receiver. I think it's 40 now on ESPN. When I made the rankings, he was wide receiver 44. But I think he is really up there. He. It's a rookie. We haven't seen him yet, but there's always those rookie breakouts. And like last year was Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Like basically every year, I think we did the research like last week or something like that. Like every year,
Hmm.
there's been a rookie in the top 10 of wide receivers, and you can take the shot on T Mac, you can take the shot on Golden, and you can take the shot on Igbuka. I think those are really the three guys that got the chance to do it, and
Ibuka has that
it
potential
could
to
be
be
him,
like
right? I mean,
your
Mike Evans.
keeper. If you're in a keeper league, he could be
You
a
you, ne-
stud.
you
Yeah.
never want to say it, but Mike Evans could miss some weeks, and especially if he misses weeks early when Godwin and McMillan are still on pup, he's going to be their only guy, and Baker Mayfield's not going to stop throwing the ball. And like you
Right.
said, Igbuka is this ultra talented wide receiver, also a first round draft pick, I believe.
Hmm.
I'm really really high on Igbuka. I want to say Jawan Jennings. Maybe this is a little bit of PTSD that I've gotten here, but I played against him on his 50-point week last year. But with Brandon Ayuk sidelined for at least the first few games of the 2025 season. I mean, it's going to be him and it's going to be Ricky Pearsall kind of jaunting for touches in the San
Yeah.
Francisco passing game, and it's basically just that, right? So I mean, Jawan Jennings, we've seen it before. Ricky Pearsall, maybe you can project. Maybe he's got that dog in him after getting shot, right? But you could project that he might be
Hope
really
and
good.
Cope.
But
Good.
but Jawan Jennings, I mean, you can really hope, and maybe left to cope about him being a solid wide receiver one on the
Please not one.
49ers.
And I just want to point out, Jordan Addison had 212 points last year with 2 games missed.
Yes.
So if you can settle for the 3 game suspension, expected to return, I'm looking at September 28th.
Yep.
If you draft him, he's one of those guys that on a points per game basis down the road might end up being, a super valuable player for his draft slot for the value that you drafted him at.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation. Any of these guys, like I got just DeAndre Hopkins after a 6-game suspension a couple years ago. When he came back, he won me the league because he was scoring 17 points a game,
Yes.
and he went so far down in the draft. The important thing to remember is if you can replace him in your lineup for the time being, then that can just be,
It's
all the better benefits down the road.
it's really a thing where it's gonna depend on your drafting strategy because a guy taking Jordan Addison at 40, if I have three wide receivers or two or three wide receivers I'm really confident in front of him, I'm fine taking that stab because one, him or any of my other wide receivers could definitely be trade bait later through the season. But you can't take Jordan Addison as your wide receiver 2 or even probably your first flex and just kind of be okay with him within the first 3 weeks because you go 0-3, you go 1-2 to start a fantasy season, and that really can switch your perspective on your team dynamics. So if he's not getting that suspension, I mean, maybe on a points per game basis, he's a top 30, 31, 32 kind of wide receiver, but because of that 3-game suspension, you have to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, great tier. Hope and Cope, love that name.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I would prefer more of like an Emeka Ibuka out of this range
Yeah.
just for the upside. But great
And
tier,
like I said,
great tier.
I
No
think that
slap against
Egbuka
that one.
probably leaps into my D tier, whatever those are called, the late upside guys. I
Okay,
think he really fits more into that than the Hope and Cope tier. I don't think you're really.
gotcha.
I mean, maybe I'm just high on him, but I don't think you're really coping on Emeka Egbuka.
So you're sticking with the gradings from the school days, with the exception of the S tier being the sort of video game type, elite above
I don't know
A.
about you. I was
But
getting S's in school all the time.
yeah, it's just superior. But you went from A down to F, and now I see you've got another different name for the last tier we're gonna go over here. Please explain to me what you got going on in this tier.
Yeah, we got the way too many side quests tier. We call it the dropout tier. I liked calling it the Z tier as well, right? Like it reminds me of that scene from SpongeBob when Plankton's picking out the files to steal the Krabby Patty formula, and he's like, Plan Z, yes, it's
Plan Z.
perfect. But our dropout tier, Z tier, are way too many side quests
If they
tier.
dropped out of high school, okay.
Yes. It's wide receiver 41. We got Roma Dunze. 42, Michael Pittman Jr. 43, Cooper Cup. Wide receiver 4, we got Chris Olave. 45, Ricky Pearsall. 46, Keon Coleman. 47, Chris Godwin and his non-existent left knee. Josh Downs at wide receiver 48, Jaden Reed at 49, and Jaden Higgins at 50. Nice little Jaden square to wrap it up at 49 and 50.
Godwin's
right
the
there.
ankle.
The ankle,
Godwin's the ankle that
Left
got
ankle,
like this
yes.
this. I don't even know how it's still on his body.
Got like
but,
Kevin Ware basically,
dude,
like
I'm going through this list and I'm thinking like, what a great name for this, because you got guys like you. Some people just switch teams like Cooper Cup, and like that's a side quest. You got Olave, who's probably just like wandering the woods, concussed half the time. You got Ricky Pearsall, who was literally shot. And
I mean,
like,
literally a Dark
what I mean?
Souls side quest that he went on. Like,
You got Chris Godwin's foot backwards.
yeah,
Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr. just with a quarterback carousel. They got Danny Pesos again. This is the hilarious title for this tier. But I know you kind of want to get my takes, but who stands out to you on this list? Who are you targeting out of the dropout tier?
Yeah, I mean, so these are really really late in your draft. Some of the last picks you're going to be making, honestly, at this point. A lot of these guys going around like the 100 range or something like that.
So that's like your flex, maybe your first bench spot.
Yeah, this is like your first bench spot. I really think by the time you're drafting some of these
Okay.
guys. I mean, some guys I have higher and lower than ESPN. Like I know Cooper Cup, for example, is in like 85 or something in ESPN, but in my league he fell down to like 101, for example, and a lot of these other guys are
Gotcha.
going in like the early hundreds. The one guy in this tier, I mean, not the one guy. Obviously, I do think like Roma Dunze, he's going a lot higher. I have him lower than his ESPN ranking. His ESPN ranking is 32. I have him at 41, so I'm going to take him over this other guy. I think that Roma Dunze is going to be fine. He's going to be the wide receiver 2, like you said, in a Ben Johnson improved Chicago Bears offense. I don't think he's going to be some kind of stud. I don't think I'm even fine starting him at my flex every single week, but as like, a plug-and-play flex guy, I'm fine with it. But a guy who I think actually does have some upside here, it's a Colts receiver, but maybe not the one you would think. Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs is super talented, and I think having Danny Dimes or Danny Pesos as is the alliteration's so nice, Like
It's gonna, somehow one of these episodes is gonna get leaked to somebody. It's just gonna be like, like look at the disrespect, and then it's gonna Danny Dimes is gonna be like, what the fuck? He's wearing a Giants shirt. This guy's an asshole.
Right, because of the amazing success he had in New York with that one playoff win that destroyed your franchise.
Yeah.
But Josh Downs had a sneaky pretty decent year last year. He had 72 receptions, 803 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Some of
Oh
that
my
with
gosh, was that with Gardner Minshew?
that was no, that was with Anthony Richardson and who was their backup last year?
No, I think he got. Oh, wait, it wasn't Minshew, was it? No, I thought.
No, I don't think Minshew
I'm
was
gonna
on the
find
Colts
out.
last year. Whoever his backup quarterback was, Anthony Richardson, Flacco, right? I don't fucking know.
Flacco?
On
No,
the
was
Colts,
it?
who was the
Oh,
Colts?
it might have
I think it
been.
was Flacco.
That's right. Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
he had some
I was
up
gonna
and
say because he
down.
wasn't doing all that with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, he had some up and down games, and maybe you can you have to give it to Joe Flacco airing the ball out a crap ton, and I mean he wasn't as good as his 2023 season in Cleveland as he was in 2024 with the Colts, but I think he's a really talented wide receiver. He's a deep ball guy, but he does have kind of other aspects of the route tree available to him. I don't
Mm.
like it's not really based on stats. It's kind of based on a gut feeling. Is I think that Pittman's kind of washed. So I think that Josh
No.
Downs might be the wide receiver 1B on this team this year, and
No
getting him
way, dude.
and he's getting drafted at like 110, 120. I think it's a great stab to take late in drafts.
Okay, it might not be a bad stab, but to say Michael Pittman Jr. is washed is to say that it is his fault that Anthony Richardson threw for 47% completion percentage last year. I mean, Anthony Richardson had 350 more passing yards than Jonathan Taylor did rushing.
Yeah.
Usually you have like 3 times as many passing yards as you do rushing. Jonathan Taylor literally almost was more important to the Colts. He actually was more important to the Colts than Anthony Richardson because at least he couldn't throw interceptions. Holy smokes. Like these guys had
Hey,
Anthony Richardson throwing the ball.
I just want to say though, Michael Pittman Jr. was healthy the whole season, same as Josh Downs. They end up with the same amount of yards. Josh Downs was catching pass from the same guy, was he not?
But you know what?
Unless he
can
was
have
playing
a
on a different
lot more
team
to
that I didn't
do.
know about.
That can have a lot more to do with who the quarterback has a better relationship with in the scheme than it does anything else. Flacco
Have you
is
talked to
vet.
Daniel Jones
He might have
recently about which one he likes?
Yeah, I didn't, but Pittman at least has the track record on the Colts of doing it. And my thought going into this year is that Daniel Jones is going to at least give them a competent offense. They're not going to be Dudley, but if I had to choose, I'm probably only selecting one. If you would put your foot in the ground for Josh Downs, I would put mine in the ground for Michael Pittman Jr. Neither of us are stoked about having these guys,
No, like
but
obviously
if you
not.
had to have a Colts receiver, fine, you
I
can
mean, you're
have
saying
Josh
that Michael
Downs.
Pittman has done this for his whole career. He's never had more than 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns in a season. Like it's not like he was a guy
Okay,
like CeeDee Lamb that was getting 1,700, 1,800 receiving yards. I mean, I think that Michael Pittman's kind of stardom in the NFL is a little bit overblown. And Josh Downs in his first 2 seasons in the NFL has had 800 receiving yards both years. Last year had 800 receiving yards in 14 games as compared to Michael Pittman Jr. who had 800 receiving yards in 15 games, I believe.
so,
So he was averaging
so
more
Pittman
yards and touchdowns per game than Michael Pittman last year.
So Pittman in 2021, that was his best year. He had 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. And 2023, he also had a good year, and that was the one with Gardner Minshew, 1,150 yards, 4 touchdowns. And these were with pathetic Colts offenses. You know what I mean? Like this is a team that should have been so much better last year, but Anthony Richardson was such a disappointment. Like I've actually heard this. No, I've actually heard this that the Colts might have the best roster on paper. Because
Best. I
they
mean, wrong.
legitimately, I'm not exaggerating. They've had one of the best defensive rosters for a long, long time. They've always had a good offensive line. Jonathan Taylor at running back, and then they have good receivers. Like we're arguing over Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr. They're both very good receivers. They also have
I
Alec
mean, you can't
Pierce,
say
who, if you remember,
they're the best team on paper. The Eagles, the Chiefs, those are teams that are much better on paper than the Colts.
they
No
might be
matter
able
how
to.
you swing it.
The fact that the pathetic Colts have theoretically had one of the best rosters, top 3 roster, whatever it may be,
Just saying
with
it's
how poor they've
quarterback.
been performing.
Yeah.
It's a quarterback issue. So they could make a leap and bound this year as a team. And Michael Pittman, I'm looking at his last 4 years, he averages 1,000 yards a year. He went from, in 2021, 6 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 4-3. This could be a year where I actually am going to take a stand on the ground here. I'm going to say Michael Pittman Jr. is going to have his best career year this year. He's only 5 years in. I don't think he's washed. Josh Downs, maybe he becomes a favorite guy, but I had Pittman when he had these great years, and like he is a good receiver. I don't think he's elite, but I think wide receiver 42 is not correct. I'll put my stake in the ground, and I'll say
hey,
that
that's
Michael
a,
Pittman Jr. is going to finish as a top 30 wide receiver this year. I would make that board
you
bet.
know, we could put that one on the board too. We could say Josh Downs versus Michael Pittman Jr. and we could put that. Anyway, a lot of time discussing Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Neither one of these guys are ones that we're thrilled to have on our fantasy teams. The other really guy
Right.
who, if you really want to take a high upside guy who could maybe be your everyday flex guy besides Roma Dunze, maybe Cooper Kupp, the only guy I really see in that tier is Keon Coleman. Khalil Shakir is
Oh, I thought
the
you were going to say Ricky Pearsall.
maybe. I mean, it's maybe it's a hope and cope. I don't know on Ricky Pearsall, but on Keon Coleman, you know, he's still the young gun. Maybe Josh Allen kind of develops a little bit of relationship with him. Khalil Shakir, we kind of know what he is at this point. We don't really know what Keon Coleman is at this point. So if he can turn some heads at the beginning of the season, maybe he ends up being a week to week flex play.
Yeah, I want to just pull up some of Ricky Pearsall's stats because last year he was good. He was very good last year at the end of the year when he came back, and it was like scary. We're like, this guy got shot. It was very similar to that Brian Robinson Jr. Comes back and all of a sudden he's actually like good. It's not just like impressive he's playing, but like
Yeah, like he's actually
high.
good.
He's projected 200 points this year.
Yeah,
Um, and
that averages out to
last
like
year.
10 or 11, 12 points a game. Like that's pretty
So
solid.
this might have fallen out of recent memory, but he came back week 14 against Chicago, started to make he was getting like it looks like 2 targets, then
No,
four
he came
targets.
back like way
And
earlier
then
in the
week
season. He came
17.
back like halfway through the season. He came back.
Oh no, you're totally right. He
Yeah.
did he did come back, but he didn't have too many great games. He had one 17-point game week 10 against Tampa Bay, but then people might forget because this was the tail end of this was the championship week and the week after the fantasy playoffs were over. Week 17 against Detroit, 141 yards, 8 receptions and a touchdown for 28.7 fantasy points, and then in Arizona the next week, 6 receptions, 69 yards and a touchdown, 18.9 fantasy points.
I'm just
He kind of he kind of
I'm a
came
little
on
worried
last year.
about last 2 week syndrome. I mean, look, we say a lot of time like, oh, this guy had a really good second half to the season. I'm more okay with saying second half of the season. Teams aren't tanking yet. Teams aren't doing any of that stuff yet, right? So if you can base stuff off the second half of the
Detroit
season, I think
Detroit
it's okay.
wasn't locked
But
in
these
week
last
17.
2 weeks of the season, I'm not even saying that it like necessary. I just don't think it's a high enough sample size. I mean, yeah, Jawan Jennings too had a crazy game where he had 50 points. This guy had a game with 27 points. But you look at the rest of the season before that, it wasn't as good. He had 3 straight weeks without
But
a
if we
reception.
if we had to project him versus Juwan Jennings,
he had
he
a
had
5 week
just as
stretch
good of
where
a.
he had 2 receptions total.
Well, yeah, he was. He's getting ingrained into an offense for the first time after as a rookie coming off of a gun injury. But then clearly, you watch those games. If you get targeted 8 times a game, the last 2 games of the season, it's not like a tryout against some scrubs while they're tanking. Like
No.
it was 2 real NFL games. One against the Detroit Lions, whose defense wasn't like their strong suit, but they were the number 1 seed, and then versus Arizona the last week. I think that Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings should be at least be put in the same discussion. But he was a first round draft pick, and I think he has the
I can see it.
potential to take off. I think he has the potential to do that. So
Yeah.
he's someone I'd be happy.
Jawan Jennings, I
take
mean,
in
it's
the
just it's
round
my
if I
own
had
personal
to.
rankings, right? Jawan Jennings is my hope and cope because he's the one that I do have a little bit more hope for, and Ricky Pearsall's a little bit more of an afterthought to me. I do really think of Jawan Jennings as the wide receiver 1 on the team, but yeah, I could be wrong. I can't say I feel too strongly about the San Francisco 49ers wide receivers,
Okay.
and you can get Ricky Pearsall much later in drafts, I think,
Right.
than Jawan Jennings. I think Jawan Jennings is going in around the mid 90s, while Ricky Pearsall is going in the 120s. So there is a difference to be said there.
And
Any last thoughts on
yeah.
like a Keon Coleman or something like that? Like any other guys
Actually,
that you would want
Jaden
to take
Higgins.
a stab on here?
Jaden Higgins, another one of those high upside rookies, second round pick for Houston. He could very easily squeeze into a very productive wide receiver 2 in that Houston offense. 6'4", with an 80-inch wingspan. I'm seeing here.
My
He should
God.
totally have. Yeah, he should totally have a big end zone presence for the Houston Texans. And if C.J. Stroud bounces back from that sophomore slump like we think he will, wide receiver 50, not bad. I'm glad you included him in your dropout tier. Way too many side quests. Maybe his side quest was growing his arms too long. But it was a wonderful time chatting with you about your wide receiver tiers. Hot takes coming from you over on that end of the pond. Uh,
Pond.
I love,
What
I
pond? The
love
Hudson
talking as if
River?
you're like,
Like,
I love talking as if like you're in the UK, like
yeah,
you're
dude. I mean,
just like
I'm
over
a
it.
40-minute drive away from you. Like,
Yeah, we gotta start doing this in person. We gotta start doing this in person.
I
But
think
thank you all for joining us, man.
yeah, I think
What were you gonna say? Closing
throughout the
thoughts. Closing
season,
thoughts.
it's definitely more doable to do this in person. You know, we get together, watch, you record a pod, watch the second half of Monday Night Football. I think that's maybe
I
something that
agree.
we could swing.
We all right, maybe a live ep or two coming to the GogertZone podcast. We're gonna cross our fingers and hope that we stick with this for the next 2 weeks and actually bring this into the regular season
For the
this year.
first time in history, Go-Good Zone actually in the fantasy football season.
We were just talking about how we're probably gonna need to do it on Monday so you guys can get the release on Tuesday, get your waiver wire set each week.
Mhm.
But thank you guys for joining us. I've got my first pumpkin spice cold foam
Oh, it's
whatever
fall,
cold
baby. It's
brew.
football
It's
season.
fall. It's football season. It's upon us. Good luck with your drafts if you still have any left. And football's right around the corner. We'll see you for the next one. Thanks, guys.